Racing to the 2020 Kentucky Derby. This time we go to Florida, and it's time for the Holy Bull Stakes, a 7-horse field, including the winter book favorite for the 2020 Kentucky Derby. Let's start at the rail, and Toledo is owned by Juddmonte Farms, trained by Chad Brown, who a lot of people know him as a turf trainer, but he has a top prospect here in Toledo. And the big question with Toledo is always going to be, can he get the distance in grade 1, grade 2 company at 9 furlongs or 10 furlongs? That being by, he's a son of Into Mischief, and so far Into Mischief has sired a lot of precocious, win early type of 3-year-olds, and they don't necessarily progress up to that 9 furlong distance, and even really in the second half of their 3-year-old years. They tend to win at 2, they tend to win some of the stakes races at 3 years old in January, February, March, but then it seems like the rest of them start to grow and kind of mature into faster, longer distance route horses. But Toledo, getting back to his on-track performances, second in his debut race, and then busted open with a 3-length victory. That was at the Big A. And then the last race, he was bet down to 4-5 and had kind of a rough trip that day and lost to Ete Indian. He was 7-2 on the morning line, and Irad Ortiz rides. Toledo is a type of horse that I think he's going to be closer to the pace, especially with that rail draw, and I wouldn't even be surprised to see Toledo on the lead. His recent works indicate he does have a little bit of speed and kind of an extra gear if he wants to use it. This is only 1 mile and a 16th, and Toledo definitely is a contender from that rail post position. Uncork the Bottle, he's looking to be the next math wizard. He's 3 for 3 in his lifetime, and they claimed him out of his maiden claiming race for $16,000. Now he's definitely moving up in class here, and his Brisnet speed figures are a little bit on the light side. He would have to improve by about 8 or 9 points on his Brisnet speed figure, and he'd have to see a few other horses decline in this race for Uncork the Bottle to be a real contender on the win end. But it is a good story. Pedigree is fine for 1 mile and a 16th. Colonel John, that was always some untapped potential at a distance. He ran in some big distance races, won the Travers Stakes out at Saratoga. He's by Tiz Now. And then on the mare's side, yeah, definitely in some route and distance pedigree, with Pure Prize being on the broodmare side. So Uncork the Bottle, a good story, but he has to get faster to compete in this race. He's probably the one of only 2 horses I'm throwing out on the win end. The big favorite is Tiz the Law, 3-5 on the morning line. You don't see that too often in a 7-horse field, but Tiz the Law, one of the top 3 winner book favorites, and he's been bet down in all 3 of his races. He was actually 3.5 to 1 in his debut when he won by 4 lengths, then came back with a monster Champagne victory. Now that day he was kind of aided by the race flow. A couple of horses went out there, Gozilla, and they dueled on the lead with Green Light Go. They made kind of some mid-race moves, and Tiz the Law really kind of looped the field and made an impressive eye visually. But I'm not sure that's always going to be a little bit of a question mark, although the pedigree says 1 mile and a 16th, 1 mile and an 1/8 is no issue. He was aided by the race flow in the Champagne, and then he had trip trouble. He got trapped a little bit. It was kind of a questionable ride as the favorite. He was trapped and pocketed inside most of the race in the Kentucky Jockey Club underneath the Twin Spires. Tiz the Law most likely going to have 2 preps as a 3-year-old, so he better get a lot out of this race because he might only have 1 more race before the Kentucky Derby. Tiz the Law, your 3-5 favorite for the Holy Bull. Ete Indian, a monster speed factor in his last race. He beat Toledo on the square. He was tiring at the end of that race, but it was understandable. His Brisnet pace fractions were fast at the half-mile pole, and he ended up getting a 103 Brisnet speed figure, and that clearly is the fastest in the race so far. It's going to be interesting to see what Ete Indian can do. Pedigree is more turf with that summer front and then warm front, and then you get some mizzen mast on the mare side, but distance should not be a problem. A lot of times a good turf horse can run 1 good dirt race in a row, and that's why you saw trainers like Charlie Winningham. They would bring horses turf to dirt and then go back to the turf, and then 4 or 5 races down the road bring them back to the dirt. And he was able to do that with horses like Ak and a few of the other horses. Even with some of his Nasser El Arab won the Santa Anita Handicap and a few other horses. So A horse like last time out, he got a 103 Brisnet on the dirt, first time on the dirt. Can he replicate a race like that? But pedigree says he can get the distance, and he's in form, and he's got the snake juice in this race. Clear Destination, 20-1 in the morning line. He's another toss out. He's already ran 9 times. Not sure there's a lot of improvement. He's another one. He's going to have to improve by 10 Brisnet speed points, which is about 4 lengths to really get competitive. Or you'd have to see Toledo and Tis the Law and Ete Indian all regress by about 5 or 6 Brisnet speed points. Relentless Dancer, big victories the last 2 out, winning by 10 lengths and 9 lengths out. He's the speed horse. He's going to stretch out. He could be on the lead here. Interesting enough, that's Jose Ortiz on Relentless Dancer. Irad Ortiz is on Toledo. And sometimes when they're both in a race, you got to kind of look at the race dynamics. They have been known to kind of set one another up every once in a while. So we'll see. Relentless Dancer, is he the speed, or does Toledo send from the rail? Definitely one to consider. Relentless Dancer. Otherwise, you know, the speed figures, high 80s. Again, he has to improve off that last Brisnet speed figure. Rounding out the field is Mayberry Deputy. Ken McPeak tends to do well at long odds, and he's got a 15-1 shot in this race. Impressive victory in the maiden race the last time out. Came off the pace, but again, the fractions that day were fast. The pace collapsed, and he picked up the pieces. Definitely a sprint pedigree on both sides, but he's in form, and Ken McPeak always seems to get horses that can outrun their pedigree. He finds those bargain yearlings and trains and develops them probably better than any other trainer out there. So Mayberry Deputy, one to consider for the bottom half of that exacta or in the trifecta. Who do you like in the Holy Bull? Leave a note below, hit subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. We're going to have a preview up of the Withers. We already have a preview up of the Robert Lewis Stakes from Santa Anita. And earlier this week, we took a look at the Kentucky Derby point standings as we lead you on the road to the 2020 Kentucky Derby.